Creative Assembly announced yesterday the news that we've been waiting for almost 20 years, that Medieval 3 Total War is coming. Yes. It's obviously super early stages. They've said pre-production. But I don't think it's too early to ask the question everyone is wondering, will it be any good? And I think the weighing mechanism for answering that for me is going to be not just is it a well-made game, but can it eclipse Medieval 2 as the game that I return to and play for years to come? In other words, can this both scratch all the same itches as Medieval 2 and add to the immersion and enjoyability of that game? In this video, I'm going to examine a few reasons why I think that Medieval 3, or technically Total War Medieval 3, still not over that switch, has the potential to do just this and be really, really good. I'm also going to look at a few reasons to be skeptical of the promises that CA has made and open the discussion for what features and changes need to be made in order to make the game worthwhile. I should note that while I'm optimistic about this announcement, I'm approaching it from a perspective that is generally pretty critical of modern games, and Total War titles in particular. I've played a ton of Medieval 2, some of Empire, and have opened Napoleon and Shogun 2 once each. I've never played Rome 2, Attila, Pharaoh, or any of the Warhammer titles. For me, I was drawn to Medieval 2 because I'm a huge medieval history buff, and I've continued to play it because its replayability and immersiveness are extremely high. So, here are the things it needs to do to be like Medieval 2. First of all, it needs to be fun. You have to be able to enjoy yourself while playing the game. I might ruffle some feathers with this one, but for me, video games are supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable, and not overly challenging. It's the sandbox feel of creating and building your own kingdom that I really enjoy. Sure, I challenge myself to do hard things here or there for a YouTube video, but if this game is going to be one that I play for decades to come like I did with Medieval 2, I need to really be able to enjoy myself while I'm playing. Second is that it needs to be immersive and offer the chance to take your campaign in crazy directions. I love that you can migrate Scotland to Timbuktu and build a mercantile empire, or that you can build a colony state around your captured crusade target. Like I said, I haven't played a lot of later Total War titles, but my impression is that you were often quite limited in the feasibility of your more far-fetched ideas. Next, it needs to be historically authentic. It's fun to have recognizable characters on your side, on other sides, and as third-party characters. Finally, this is a personal preference, but I would love to see a return to a classic artistic style, particularly on the game map. I don't love the translucent UI that later Total War titles have, the thick fog on the campaign map, or the slow, clunky zooming mechanics with the mouse. Fortunately, we do have some reason to believe they're going the classic artistic route from some of the concept design. I don't love this paper map look, but I wouldn't be too mad about it either. Most modern games are obsessed with graphic realism and eventually end up with overly ray-traced, contrasty messes that just aren't satisfying to look at. I just want a smooth, clean interface that feels responsive. Now, some things it can do to improve on Medieval 2. This is not an exhaustive list. I might do a more extensive feature wish list at some point, but these are the primary areas for improvement over Medieval 2. The first and most important thing is the AI. This is probably the single biggest criticism that I and most others have with Medieval 2, is that once you learn the game, the AI is not necessarily a very good match for you. I'd love to see the battle AI utilize realistic battle tactics, use the terrain to their advantage, and make each battle feel distinct and exciting. As it is in Medieval 2, they just sort of march their guys towards you, wherever you are, and they get particularly confused when they think they have the upper hand, something that's pretty easy to exploit if you've seen any of the videos on my channel. Similarly, with the campaign AI, it would be nice to see them behave more realistically and strategically when it comes to long-term faction growth. Ideally, you'd like to see them plan out their moves several turns in advance, and honor alliances when it's in their interest to do so, instead of backstabbing you at every chance they get. Look at you, Milan and Sicily. Another big area for improvement is customization. In the base game, it's hard to describe why, but I just love the ability to rename settlements after your favorite generals or after your cat. It's so simple, but it adds exactly the type of immersive customization I think Medieval 3 should have more of. I would love to have the ability to build custom settlements. Maybe it's a place where there's strategic resources on the map that you want to turn into an economic hub, or maybe it's to guard important crossings. I think it would be super neat to have a dynamic campaign map that starts with fewer settlements at the beginning of the campaign, and they multiply as the global population increases. And you, as the ruler of your faction, have some degree of control where that population increases. Also, as you build and customize your settlements, that could affect the way it shows up in the battle map, and I think there's a lot of cool customizable stuff you could do with that. It would be awesome to build a castle on a tile overlooking a valley, and then 40 turns later get the chance to defend that castle after you've built it up and the enemy is approaching. I'd also love to see more customizable family tree elements. possibly selecting names from a predetermined list of historical figures when a baby is born. I'd also love to be able to choose the heir to the throne. I know some Medieval 2 mods allowed for this, but it was definitely a workaround and it was pretty clunky. Even things as small as kings being referred to as the 4th or the 5th, if you've had several kings named Charles, would go a long way. I'd also love to see more with emerging factions and consolidating empires and just generally more dynamic faction names and types. Some people have talked about mirroring the clan system from Bannerlord, where you get to create your own house and vie for the throne. While I like that system for what it is, I don't think that getting too much into the weeds of different warlords and dukes and counts and earls vying for the English throne is necessarily going to be the right choice for Total War. Maybe they can do a little bit of this kind of stuff for city-states like in Italy or Germany, but for most factions I prefer they just give us a little bit more customization options, like for Hungary to become the Hungarian Empire at a certain point of conquest, or expanding on the Teutonic campaign mechanic to change religions prompted by certain historical events like the Reformation. Another thing is a larger scope. Depending on how ambitious CA wants to go, I'd be open to the idea of a more fleshed out America's exploration for the late game, a Silk Road to Asia, or even Chinese and Japanese campaigns altogether, but only if it can be done well. I suspect the scope, especially the way they've talked about it already, will continue to be limited mostly to the greater European theater, and I'm definitely okay with that. I expect based on this concept art that there will likely be a little bit of a larger scale, with more settlements than Medieval 2, possibly similar to the Kingdom's Grand Campaign mod or Stainless Steel. And speaking of those mods, one of the most important things that Creative Assembly can do to do right by the community if they want this to be the definitive Total War title, which they've said is one of their goals, is to ensure its longevity by actively encouraging the modding community. Medieval 2 is what it is today because modding was possible to an extent that later titles didn't permit. A good game can be made 1,000 times better by creative members of the community with cool ideas and too much time on their hands. So here's a few reasons why I'm optimistic about the development of Medieval 3. First is the Warcore engine, which they announced in the same live stream that they announced Medieval 3. The Warscape engine, which has powered each game since Empire, is definitely starting to show signs of age. The demo of it was pretty limited, but it's definitely clear that there's some exciting possibilities. For example, full-scale destruction for siege battles, or even fording rivers and deforesting mountains to gain tactical advantages would add a very cool dimension of immersion. One of the hills that I will die on as a fan of video games that I think separates the early 2000s games from those of the 2010s and 2020s is the engine-based approach to games. Yes, I know Medieval 2 was built using essentially the same engine as Rome, and before that, Shogun and Medieval 1 had the same engine, but that's a little bit different than every game Empire through Pharaoh using the Warscape engine, or outside of Total War, literally everything from Red Dead Redemption to Fortnite to the virtual stage of The Mandalorian being dragged and dropped into the Unreal Engine. When everything is designed to look as photorealistic as possible using the same tools, all games start to bleed together, and you lose any semblance of distinctive art styles. Personally, I think this is what makes the early 2000s games my favorite and keeps me coming back to playing them. I totally understand that relying on engines is necessary as technology has evolved. It's not possible to rewrite every game from source code. But the point I'm trying to make with Medieval 3 is that since it's shaping up to be the initial or primary use case for this new engine, you'd hope that the engine was or is being designed with it in mind. The second reason I'm optimistic is that the design team is led by people who were fans of the original Medieval 2 game. The creative director Leaf describes the vision behind the game as quote, rewriting history, and spoke of being influenced by his days in the Total War Center forums, writing after-action reports. I also fondly remember those days. And I think that this is what Total War is at its best. The ability to drop into an authentic historical situation and change the trajectory of history. And I think that they get that. Senior designer Luke Holmes, who was also on the announcement panel, described the influence that Medieval 2 has had on him, which led him to pursue a degree in history and then to work for CA. I think it's clear the game is led by the right people. Whether it can achieve the vision they've set out, I'm not quite sure. So, here are some possible roadblocks. The first thing here is to reiterate that this is in pre-production. If the past couple years of video game development have taught us anything, it's that a lot of things can go wrong in the life cycle of a video game. Studios are more complicated than ever and owned by larger conglomerates than ever, so making a good game is a tough task. A lot of things can go wrong, a lot of roadblocks can spring up. This game could be anywhere from 2 to 5 years away. I think it's unlikely to get canceled since Creative Assembly has a lot riding on this to bring it to market, but it definitely could be delayed for a long time like GTA 6, or the scope could tighten as the reality of production sets in. The second thing is that they're also targeting a console release. Now, they've claimed that they won't try to dumb down the game in order to make this happen, but at the very least, the cross-platform functionality is going to draw some of the attention of the developers away from the PC experience. And third is that frankly, the concept could just be too complex. One of my main frustrations with a game like Bannerlord is that the large-scale battles are awesome, but getting to the point where you're actually in a position in the campaign to fight them is too hard. And then once it happens, it's over and it's hard to get back to that point. In the same way, Bannerlord, no relation, I also found to be too complex when it comes to the economics and layout of cities. There's just too many things happening all at once and too many different mechanics competing against each other that it starts to make the game really inaccessible to the casual player. Creative Assembly talked in the live stream about a potential army raising mechanic, and I do think there's a real possibility that they introduce too many new mechanics and the learning curve for the game becomes too big. I think there's a simplicity both in the artistic style and game mechanics to Medieval 2 that I think is a major reason that it retains its charm. All this to say that on the whole, I think I'm much more optimistic than many of the other Total War YouTubers who have commented so far about this announcement. I know that the community has been burned by CA over the last decades, and some have speculated that they're only announcing Medieval 3 to recover lost goodwill. Many in the community just don't believe that CA still has what it takes to make a game like Medieval 2. I know that prior to this announcement, there was a certain part of me that would have just preferred a remaster of Medieval 2, with maybe a source code release similar to what EA did with the Command & Conquer Zero Hour game that has breathed new life into that online experience. That would definitely revitalize the modding scene, but I think that there's reason to believe that Medieval 3, when it arrives, has the potential to become the definitive Total War, and I'm excited to keep up to date with their latest developments. Let me know what you think and what Medieval 3 has to do to earn your approval. If there's a lot of interest, I might do a Medieval 2 live stream sometime soon to talk feature wish list for Medieval 3, so let me know if you want to see that. And if you haven't seen it already, go back and watch my video where I beat Medieval 2 after waiting 200 turns and not attacking or recruiting at all.